Antonio Brown was on pace to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. After sliding in the draft, he'd become the most dominant wide receiver in the NFL for 5 straight years. We're talking about 6 consecutive 100-catch seasons and 4 first-team All-Pro selections in a row, which are numbers that put him in the same conversation as Jerry Rice and Randy Moss at their absolute peaks. But then he threw it all away. Antonio Brown grew up in Liberty City, Miami, which is one of the toughest neighborhoods in the entire country. Gang violence was just a way of life out there, and a lot of AB's friends got caught up in that same cycle. He was talented enough in high school to earn a scholarship to Florida International University, but he never actually played a snap for them. An altercation with campus security got him expelled before he ever suited up, and the school essentially acted like he never existed. Most kids in that situation never bounced back, but Brown reached out to Butch Jones, who was a coach who had previously recruited him and followed him to Central Michigan. AB arrived as a walk-on with no scholarship and no guarantee of anything. Within a few weeks, he had earned his spot, and over the next 3 seasons, he became the school's all-time leader in receptions. But none of that production was enough to make NFL scouts take him seriously during the draft process. He ran a 4.56 40-yard dash at the combine, which teams at the time considered way too slow for an outside receiver. And he was only 5'10", at £185. When Pittsburgh finally got to pick 195, offensive coordinator Bruce Arians pushed for him, and Mike Tomlin trusted the evaluation enough to take Brown in the 6th round. It just took the rest of the league a few more years to realize how special he actually was. By the end of his 2nd season, he had over 1,100 receiving yards, and by 2013, he was the most productive receiver in the entire league. The 5-year run that followed is one of the best any receiver has ever put together in the history of the sport. Let's talk about what Antonio Brown actually did on the field from 2013 to 2018, because some of those numbers are the best we've ever seen at the position. In 2013, his first season as the undisputed number 1 receiver in Pittsburgh, he caught 110 passes for 1,499 yards and 8 touchdowns. That alone would be a career year for most receivers, but Brown did it and then just kept going. The following season, he hauled in 129 catches for 1,698 yards to lead the entire league. He backed that up in 2015 with 136 catches for 1,834 yards, leading the league again and securing back-to-back first-team All-Pro selections. He was doing things at this position that no one had ever done before, and that year-over-year consistency is what separated him from guys who just had a hot streak. The catch count is where things get insane. From 2013 through 2018, Brown had 6 straight seasons with at least 100 receptions and 1,200 yards, which is a feat no receiver in NFL history had ever accomplished. Not Jerry Rice or Marvin Harrison or Chris Carter or anyone else. Randy Moss and Jerry Rice combined for 6 total 100-catch, 1,200-yard seasons across their entire careers, but Brown had 6 of them back-to-back. The 2015 game against the Raiders is the single best example of what he was at his peak. During that Week 9 matchup, Antonio Brown caught 17 passes for 284 yards. He didn't find the end zone once, and it was still the most dominant individual receiving performance of the decade. 17 catches in a single game means Big Ben was looking for him on almost every single snap, and AB just kept getting open. He was a 5'10" receiver with a 4.56 40 time, yet he made professional cornerbacks look like they were guarding smoke. When he finished that 2015 season, he was only 166 yards away from 2,000, having played 3 separate games where he sat right around the 200-yard mark. Antonio wasn't winning because he was bigger than defensive backs, and he wasn't beating press coverage with pure speed. His separation came from route running that was genuinely at a different level than almost anyone playing at the time. He would set up a corner on the outside, plant his foot, and be 2 steps clear before the break. Coaches and players around the league talked about his footwork the way you would talk about someone whose craft you can't replicate. Odell Beckham Jr., who was in the middle of his own elite stretch as a receiver during this period, was asked publicly who the best receiver in football was. He didn't hesitate when he named Antonio Brown, calling him one of the most explosive playmakers he had ever seen. When one of the best receivers in the league gives you that type of credit, it carries real weight. By 2018, the last full season he would play for Pittsburgh, Brown led the entire league in receiving touchdowns with 15. He earned 4 consecutive first-team All-Pro selections from 2014 through 2017 and made 7 Pro Bowls total. From 2013 to 2018, he put up 686 receptions, 9,145 yards, and 67 touchdowns. That 6-year run stacks up against anybody at any position in any era of the game. He had also signed a 5-year, $42.5 million extension back in 2012, which made him one of the better paid receivers in the league at the time. But by 2018, that contract looked like a total bargain for the team. He was the engine of Pittsburgh's entire offense, the player every defensive coordinator built their game plan around, and by most reasonable measures, the best receiver playing football. The numbers got him there, but even when he was putting up those numbers, other things were already starting to move in a different direction. The first real sign of crazy came right after he signed that contract extension in 2012. Ryan Clark, who was a safety on that Steelers team, told a story a little bit later about how Brown and cornerback Keenan Lewis got into it during a one-on-one drill in practice. Brown turned to the defenders on the sideline and started yelling at them not to touch him because he was the franchise. When defensive coordinator Dick LeBeau told him to get back on the other side, AB cussed him out in the middle of the field. Clark had to step in and things nearly got physical. This was a guy who had just gotten paid, and his first response to that security was to tell the guys around him that the rules of competition no longer applied to him. The Steelers managed it because the production was real and because Pittsburgh has a long history of keeping difficult personalities in line when the wins are coming. But the pattern didn't go away, and instead, it expanded. In January 2016, during a wildcard game against the Cincinnati Bengals, Vontaze Burfict delivered a helmet-to-helmet shot that knocked Brown unconscious before he even hit the ground. He blacked out and had no memory of being on the sideline at all. His coaches later said he was talking and smiling, but Brown couldn't remember any of it. Whether the hit directly changed him or whether it accelerated something that was already there is a question nobody can answer with certainty. What is not a question is what came next. The 2017 season brought sideline explosions that were harder to explain away. One week in particular, Brown got frustrated about not being targeted enough during a game against the Ravens, so he walked over to the sideline and threw a Gatorade cooler. Roethlisberger had been standing nearby and had to watch his number one receiver have a full meltdown because the ball hadn't come his way enough. This wasn't competitive frustration anymore, but something closer to an inability to function when things weren't going exactly his way. Then came January 2017, right after a playoff win against Kansas City. AB had just caught 108 yards worth of passes to help knock the Chiefs out, but instead of keeping the locker room moment private, he pulled out his phone and started a Facebook live stream while Mike Tomlin was addressing the team. Tomlin didn't know he was being recorded, and at that time, AB had a $244,000 contract with Facebook to produce live content, so he streamed his head coach's private speech to a national audience to cash in on it. Tomlin addressed it publicly the next day, calling it foolish and stupid. He said he'd hoped this wouldn't become AB's story, the kind of player who moves from team to team because of this stuff. That's a little bit of foreshadowing. The 2018 season is where Pittsburgh ran out of patience entirely. In the week leading into the season finale against the Bengals, a game Pittsburgh needed to win to keep their playoff chances alive, Brown ran the wrong route in a practice walkthrough. Roethlisberger threw the ball down in frustration and told the coaches to get him out of there. AB picked up the ball and fired it right back at his quarterback before walking off the practice field and not coming back for the rest of the week. When game day arrived, he showed up expecting to play as if the week hadn't happened, but Pittsburgh benched him and he left at halftime. The Steelers had spent years managing a personality that was getting harder and harder to contain, and they were finally done. They put him on the trade market, and within a few weeks, Oakland came calling. In March of 2019, the Steelers had finally moved on from Antonio Brown by trading him to the Oakland Raiders for a 3rd and a 5th round pick. Think about that for a second, because we're talking about a Hall of Fame caliber receiver who served as the engine for one of the league's most explosive offenses for 6 straight years. Usually, teams spend those mid-round picks on a backup linebacker or a developmental tackle. Now, that is exactly how much his trade value had cratered. The Raiders still felt he was worthy of the gamble, handing him a new 3-year deal worth $50 million, with $30 million of that fully guaranteed. On paper, this looked like the perfect fresh start with a new system and a new QB. That clean slate lasted about 3 weeks though before things went off the rails. When training camp arrived, Brown missed almost the entire thing because he had somehow managed to get frostbite on his feet. This wasn't a football injury or a freak collision on the practice field, but rather the result of him walking into a cryotherapy chamber without wearing the right protective footwear. He froze the bottoms of his feet so bad that he couldn't even stand, let alone practice. And then he decided to post the graphic photos of the blistered skin on Instagram for the whole world to see. By the time August rolled around, the Raiders hadn't seen their star receiver run a single route, and he was already becoming a national punchline. Once his feet finally healed up enough for him to get back on the grass, the helmet situation started. The NFL had officially banned the shut air advantage model that Brown had worn his entire career, ruling that it no longer met the updated safety standards for the league, which is ironic. Brown absolutely refused to switch to a newer model, telling the team he wouldn't play a single snap in a different helmet, and even threatening to retire over this issue. He filed a grievance with the league to keep his old gear. He lost that case, filed a second grievance, and then lost that one too. At one point, he actually tried to paint his old band helmet to match the Raiders' silver and black colors, hoping the equipment staff wouldn't notice the difference, but they noticed immediately. And after weeks of a bizarre standoff, he finally agreed to wear a legal model so practice could resume. On September 4th, the Raiders hit Brown with a combined fine of roughly $54,000 for missing practices and a walkthrough without any kind of excuse. AB reacted by taking a photo of the official fine letter and posting it to his Instagram story with a caption claiming his own team wanted to hate on him. Later that same week, he confronted general manager Mike Mayock on the practice field right in front of the entire roster. The argument turned ugly fast, and teammates had to actually physically pull Brown away from his own GM to keep things from getting violent, especially after AB had called Mike Mayock a cracker in the process. The chaos continued when Brown released a private, recorded phone call between himself and head coach John Gruden on social media. In the recording, you can hear Gruden pleading with him to just stop the distractions and play football, but Brown told his coach he was more than just a player and that it wasn't just about the game anymore. The Raiders had seen enough and responded by voiding the $30 million in guaranteed money from his contract due to the conduct detrimental to the team. Brown immediately went to Instagram to post "Release Me," and Oakland granted that request the very same day. He ended his tenure with the Raiders without ever playing a single regular season snap for the franchise. A little bit later, the New England Patriots stepped in and signed him to a one-year deal worth up to $15 million. Brown ended up playing exactly one game in the Patriots uniform during a Week 2 matchup against Miami. He caught 4 passes for 56 yards and a touchdown, looking like a receiver who could still dominate when he actually focused on the game. However, just days after that performance, his former personal trainer filed a civil lawsuit alleging that he had actually her on 3 separate occasions between 2017 and 2018. Brown denied everything, and while the Patriots initially said they were monitoring the situation, the wall started closing in quickly. A second woman came forward soon with similar claims of misconduct. Brown's response to these new allegations were to send her threatening text messages that included a photo of her children, which prompted her attorney to contact the NFL. 11 days after they had signed him, the Patriots released Brown and cut their losses entirely. Nike dropped him, his helmet manufacturer walked away, and he lost his contract along with every major endorsement he had left. In the span of about 2 weeks, he had completely destroyed whatever professional credibility he had remaining. He had been on 3 different teams in less than 1 calendar year, yet he only played meaningful football for one of them. He walked away from $30 million in guaranteed cash because he couldn't make it through a single preseason without burning every single bridge in sight. By the time the 2020 season rolled around, no rational person thought that Antonio Brown was going to get another shot in the NFL. But COVID was a weird time, and Tom Brady had just joined the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, so he almost immediately started leaning on the organization to sign Brown. This wasn't just a case of Brady saying nice things in a press conference, because he was actually going to bat for the guy behind the scenes and putting his own reputation on the line. He even went as far as inviting Antonio to live at his house while he got settled in Florida, working out with him privately and even texting him to make sure he didn't miss his therapy sessions. Tom treated it like he was helping a friend in a life crisis rather than just making a football move, and the Buccaneers eventually gave in and brought him on board. Antonio had to serve an 8-game suspension first to satisfy the league's personal conduct policy, but when he finally debuted in Week 9 against the Saints, he showed he still had it. In only 8 regular season games, he managed to catch 45 passes for 483 yards and 4 touchdowns. If you project that over a full 16-game schedule, he was playing at a 900-yard pace despite being away from the game for over a year. Tampa Bay made it all the way to the Super Bowl, where they dismantled the Kansas City Chiefs in a 31-9 blowout. AB actually caught a touchdown pass in that game, and the image of him holding the Lombardi Trophy on the sideline felt like the perfect ending to a chaotic story. The start of the 2021 season looked even more promising for the veteran wide receiver. Through the first 7 games, he racked up 42 catches for 545 yards and 4 more touchdowns, making the Tampa offense look like a legitimate threat to repeat as champions. But then in November, the league handed down a 3-game suspension after finding out that Brown had submitted a fake COVID vaccination card. From the outside, the decision made absolutely no sense. He was playing on a championship contender with the greatest quarterback ever, yet he chose to falsify a medical document instead of just following the protocols. That move cost him 3 weeks of stats and destroyed a lot of the goodwill he had built up with the Bucs front office that was already tired of managing his drama. He eventually came back and started producing again, which only made the events of January 2nd, 2022 even more impossible to explain. The Bucs were playing the Jets and found themselves trailing 24-10 in the 3rd quarter. Brown had a quiet day going with 3 catches for 26 yards, and during a live drive, head coach Bruce Arians told him to get back into the game. Brown refused to go in, which led Arians telling him to get out, and that is when things took a turn for the surreal. Antonio Brown stood at the sideline, stripped off his jersey and shoulder pads, threw his gear towards the fans, and jogged shirtless through the end zone into the tunnel. His teammate Mike Evans tried to physically stop him from leaving, but Brown just kept going, waving to the crowd while the cameras captured one of the most bizarre exits in the history of professional sports. In the days following the meltdown, Brown claimed that he had told Arians he couldn't play because of a legitimate ankle injury, and that the coach tried to force him onto the field anyway. An MRI on the following Monday did actually show broken bone fragments and torn ligaments in the ankle, so the physical pain was real. However, the way he chose to leave wasn't an injury timeout or a professional conversation with the medical staff. After the game ended, Bruce Arians didn't mince words, telling reporters that Brown was no longer a member of the team and that story was over. The last time we saw Antonio Brown in an NFL uniform, he was jogging shirtless through a tunnel in New Jersey while the game was still going on. What followed that meltdown was a different kind of destruction that felt slower and much more personal, especially since he had aimed it at one of the people who refused to give up on him. When Tom Brady was going through a public divorce from Giselle in late 2022, Brown decided to post doctored photos of Brady's ex-wife on social media. This wasn't some subtle commentary or a joke that landed wrong, but explicit and harassing content shared while Brady was navigating a painful period in his life. Brown also leaked private text messages Brady had sent him during their time in Tampa, showing the world moments where Tom was pushing for him to be better and calling out his selfish behavior. Tom sent those texts because he actually cared enough to say the hard things, but AB shared them because he just wanted ammunition for a fight. He eventually tried to get back into the game, though it wasn't the NFL this time. He bought a professional arena team, but he wasn't paying the players and eventually had to file for bankruptcy. His situation turned even darker in May 2025 at a celebrity boxing event in Miami. Brown got into a physical fight and fired 2 shots from a handgun, with one of those bullets grazing a man's neck. An arrest warrant was issued for second-degree attempted. That charge carries a potential sentence up to 25 years. His Hall of Fame eligibility finally opens up in 2027. As you look at his 6-year peak of 686 catches for 9,145 yards and 67 touchdowns, you're looking at some of the best production any receiver has ever put on film. But the voters would have to separate the games from the arrest warrants, the multiple crimes, and the shirtless exit. The football was real, but everything else that followed was just as real as well. Antonio Brown was the best receiver in football for a 5-year stretch that almost nobody in NFL history can match. The games don't lie, and his dominance during that era is not up for debate. But he also turned into one of the biggest villains in the history of the league. So there you have it. Subscribe if you're new, and watch this next video if you haven't already. Thanks for watching.